computer. All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Electric Vehicle Shopping Guide. I am thrilled to have with us today Chris Paine, who I know many of you know, but for those who don't, he is a director here in LA, and he's best known to electric vehicle audiences as director of his first EV documentary, Who Killed the Electric Car?, followed up by Revenge of the Electric Car. And Chris is now working on part 3, but we'll get to that in a minute. I also wanted to let you know that he directed Do You Trust This Computer?, which was scary and awful and wonderful, Bikes versus Cars, and among others, the documentary Faster, which is where I met Chris around 2003, when, if I recall correctly, he was charging his RAV at a city lot. And Chris, that dovetails into my first question for you, please. Just, would you give us the roots of your EV activism, which if I ever heard it, I'd love to hear it again.
Well, it's really about the same time you probably got interested in this topic, Zan. I had, I guess, I'll go even farther back. When I was in high school, I was very entranced with an engineer, Paul McCready, who had done a bicycle-powered airplane, went across the English Channel. And then I had heard that he was working on an electric car, and that sounded like the kind of car I'd want to have, just because he was designing it. And I think I was probably aware of the environmental issues too, but mostly I wanted to see what they came up with. So I applied to GM to be one of their early drivers. They never wrote me back. The car was called the Impact in those days. And then years later, not years later, maybe several years later, they started leasing them in California. So I went down, and it was kind of hard to find it at the dealership. You heard those stories before. They weren't super excited about selling them, I guess. But boy, I got in that car. It was fantastic. It was super fast. And this is like 1998, 99. And I became just the biggest fan of this technology. So that's how it went. I was a little bit unsure about charging and all the questions people have about electric cars even today. And even with a car that had like 60-mile range, it turned out that it was pretty much all I needed in Los Angeles. We had a Ford Explorer as our backup car in those days. And I found that I was using that like once every 2 weeks or so. So it was good to have that vehicle. But the electric car was all I needed. And then when they took the car away, we were pretty upset.
Right. And so you leased it for like the EV1 for how long, would you say?
We leased that car for 3 years, maybe I owned it, but then we got to release it for 2 more years. So I had it for 5 years. And we all assumed that we'd be able to buy it at the end of the lease, like most cars, but of course that didn't happen.
Right. And the story I remember is that you started to get, like others, upset about all of this and aware of maybe they had started crushing them at that time. I'm not sure, but you basically picked up a camera and started to document this in hopes of attracting, say, 60 Minutes. And that's what led to Who Killed the Electric Car, or not?
Exactly right. I mean, we one of the things, when the cars started all getting recalled without very good excuses at all, we realized that most people in the country hadn't heard about electric cars. They were only available in California and a couple other states, Arizona, Georgia, something like that. And my friends on the East Coast would be like, no, what is this? You charge it? And so we wanted to start documenting it so we could sort of share it. And then when the reasons around recalling the cars got more and more suspicious, we thought, well, this is going to be a good story for Nightline or 60 Minutes, whatever the shows were back then. And so we started shooting footage of what we thought were like suspicious circumstances, but they were completely uninterested. And we found out later that they had a lot of television programs had gotten burned by doing stories about Firestone tires, and they had their advertising revoked by the car companies. So nobody wanted to criticize the car companies, which kind of created an opening for us doing the movie.
That just blows me away. To jump from there to where we are today, and of course, terribly disappointing that media outlets would make decisions based on advertising. but how today, we're all watching primetime commercials for EVs.
I know. I just watched the Super Bowl or the NFC playoffs, and I just couldn't believe car after car, commercial, and the majority of them were electric. It's just amazing to see that transition in what has it been since 2006 when our movie came out. So that's not that long ago, really.
Right. And then when you made the first film, like, did you even know how it would end? Well, certainly when you first picked up your camera, you probably didn't.
No, we didn't know, and that's part of the fun and danger and unknowns of documentaries. You don't always know where you're going to end up, and as a filmmaker, you want to try to trust that process. We didn't. We never thought we would find them secretly crushing the cars in Arizona and the helicopter shots we had and all that. It was really kind of astonishing. We knew they were up to no good. I think GM in those days and a lot of those senior managers all got fired when they went bankrupt, which they richly deserved. Yeah, they just made so many mistakes one after the other, and they shot themselves in the foot because it allowed companies like Tesla and even Toyota and other companies to get really far ahead on hybrids and pure electrics.
Right. And then at what point after, by the way, I just have to add that we have some great pictures of the bunch of us who were in the film to lesser or greater degrees, myself lesser, but I always tell people I'm in it. And then I say, but if you blink, you'll miss me. But I never imagined I'd end up at Sundance Festival. And
I spent all our time trying to take me out of the film. That's the last thing I want. I can't stand seeing myself on film or even on videos like this. I prefer to be behind the scenes.
Yeah. So at what point after that wonderful debut and the film did really well on Netflix, et cetera, did you think it's time to make Revenge of the Electric Car? And what went into the thinking for that one?
Well, with environmental documentaries, you often see that, but the world's coming to an end, but there's maybe just a sliver of hope. And there were, when we finished the electric car, there were a few slivers of hope. I mean, Tesla had just started up, and we included that in the film, which was really lucky chance for us. And a couple other companies, one of which is bankrupt, at the end said other companies are doing this. There might be hope in the future. And within 2 years, we really saw things beginning to change, even at General Motors when Bob Lutz decided to take on Tesla and do their own plug-in car. So we thought, well, let's do a film that's maybe more optimistic, not just about, as the first film was, optimistic about the core technology of electric being so amazing compared to internal combustion and everything else. What it can do is incredible. But let's do something about how do you change things from the inside, as opposed to like trying to change things from the outside. So that's where that second film came from.
And the third
process, we got the early years of Tesla, which to this day we get inquiries from other documentaries doing things on Elon Musk and Carlos Ghosn and some of the players we had in those films, and we were all over that story very early. So that was fortuitous.
I spoke over you there. You said you were kind of amazed that you got such great access to Tesla. Is that what you're saying?
In Revenge of the Electric Car, yeah. I mean, in those days, Elon wasn't a celebrity, and he realized that some publicity could be good for their company starting out. They were under a lot of pressure, and there was not a sure bet that they weren't going to go bankrupt. So we got to go down there and film a bunch with him as he tried to convince the early customers that they were going to be there for real and deal with his venture capitalists and all that stuff he had to deal with.
Yeah, incredible. I just recently watched it again, and honestly, it makes me want to watch it yet again. And number 3.
Now, when I watch films again, I just have changes I want to make to improve them. So I try not to watch them. But I know we did catch a really cool moment in history there, which I think will probably stand up over time.
Awesome. And number 3, am I remembering correctly that you've tentatively titled it Rise of the Electric Car?
Yeah, we're thinking about calling the third film in this trilogy Rise of the Electric Car, because here we are. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's in the zeitgeist. It's in the mainstream. I think car companies realize that they can make money on them. I think that was one of their big stumbling blocks early on. But even more important, drivers are realizing that it's a better experience usually with electric vehicles. Maybe not for long haul trucking right now, but for a lot of uses, electric vehicles really are the tops. And that's what you and I and everybody that got the chance to drive them in the late 1990s realized. We realized that the 21st century was here. It was just such a shame when they delayed it for 20 years.
So you're telling us that you're interviewing a lot of drivers for this film?
Oh, I don't know what we're doing. You interview a lot of all kinds of people when you work on a film, and so we're in the middle.
You're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And any ballpark estimate of when we might see it?
No estimates, because it depends, what rabbit holes we go down to. We want to make an interesting film. It's not like what people already know. And when we made Who Killed the Electric Car, nobody talked about the story. Now electric cars are so much in the mainstream. We want to make sure that we're introducing material that people haven't thought of or haven't considered about the whole story of electrics.
Like what?
Oh, there's so many. Do we all need to have cars? Where do the batteries come from? What are we going to do about deep sea resource exploitation? Is hydrogen ever going to make a big comeback? Do we need to throw away all these gas cars? What about recycling? I mean, there's really 100 questions you think about transportation. But the good news is, renewable energy and recyclable batteries are an awesome combination. And I think that's what this film will come down to. But we try not to sort of know where our film is going until we make them. So it's as much a surprise for us as it is for the audience.
Right. I was sort of going to ask you if you had a crystal ball and, or even just a gut idea of where we're headed now. I mean, I go everywhere from the bottom could fall out again. Not that I'm sort of the paranoid, pessimistic type, but bad things can happen in this world. A new administration, you name it, economic vicissitudes, any sort of predictions, which I guess is also answering, how your film could end.
Well, I think, the bottom's always going to fall out. It's the question is, how do you want to live your life, and what technologies and what practices in your life you want to put in place to make it an interesting life and as clean as possible for the next person to come along. So my prediction is that, good people will find the best way to do things, and people that aren't as aware might, and then, oh shit, that sounds horrible. That's not what I want to say. I say, you don't know how things are going to end up. You do your best. And I hope that in making films like this and in your podcast here and so forth, that you're helping people see there's more choices than what they might have thought when they started.
That's what it's all about. Thanks so much for your time, Chris. We'll keep just sending that message out there, right?
Okay, thanks. And feel free to edit the hell out of this. And I'll talk to you again, Zan. Always a pleasure. Thanks for your work.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. All right.